Hi everyone and welcome to a brand new video! Today we're very happy because it's another mysterious case, another Sunday of mysteries, paranormal, etc. And I'm way too excited because by far this is my favorite case. And not because of what happened in itself, because then none will be my favorite, but because of the person we're going to talk about. As you saw in the title, we're going to talk about MARILYN Monroe. I truly love her so much. She was one of my first favorite persons in history. I think she was a very empowered woman. She wasn't afraid to do what she decided to do and to be relevant precisely in such a sexist society as it was back then. I think she made an incredible change both in men's and women's mentality, showing us that we don't have to be a size 2 or 0 to be beautiful. Everything's dedicated to MARILYN today, I mean, even my shirt. But anyway, as always, remember to follow me on all my social media. I upload a lot of extra content and I also do lives. Grab your popcorn and your food and get comfortable because this is going to be a long video, but a very interesting one. Very well, let's get started. The mysterious case of MARILYN Monroe. Very well, as always, let's start talking about the person implicated in this case. Monroe, whose real name was Norma Jean Mortensen, was born on June 1st of 1926 in Los Angeles, California. She was a very important actress within the film industry during the 20th century, one of the most renowned, becoming a pop icon and a sex symbol. Her mother was Gladys Pearl, who married a Norwegian man called Edward Mortensen. That's where MARILYN's last name came from. However, they got divorced really fast just before she knew she was pregnant. From then on, she continued her life as a single mother, after Norma was born on the 1st of June of 1926. So, she wasn't an illegitimate child, or as they called it back then, a bastard. Gladys decided to name her with the father's last name, which was Mortensen. However, she later changed her name to Norma Jean Baker. It was said that her mother chose the name Norma because one of her favorite actresses was Norma Talmadge, and also Jean after another actress called Jean Harlow. Gladys worked as a film negative cutter, which back then was kind of the work that an editor did, in a film production company called RKO Picture. However, she wasn't able to maintain her job not only due to the economic problems she had, but also because Gladys struggled with her alcohol and drug abuse problems. She was also emotionally unstable. Because of that, MARILYN began to suffer many problems during her childhood. She had to go from family to family, from orphanage to orphanage, among many other things. After a while of having been with another family, her mother was able to take her back, but then she had a new nervous crisis, so she lost the custody again, and this time she had to leave Norma with her best friend Grace. She was MARILYN's mother's best friend and was the one who precisely started teaching her more about the film industry and to encourage her to dive into this world. She really encouraged her to become an actress. However, sometime later, Norma accused the lady husband of raping her, said that his son also raped her afterwards. This made her go to another family. On this occasion, she went to the aunt of the woman who was taking care of her. During that time, MARILYN found out she also had another sister, a half-sister, on her mother's family side called Bernice. They became really good friends and kept a close relationship during all of her life, even when MARILYN became famous. Once again, another disaster occurred in her life, and it was regarding the family she was living with. The father of his family received a work memo telling him he had to move someplace else to get a better position. MARILYN decided to stop living with them because she didn't want to leave Los Angeles. So she married fast with a police officer's son who lived in the same neighborhood and who lived next door. The man was called James Doherty, and back then he was 21 years old and MARILYN was 16 years old. From then on, she goes to live with him and decides to take that house life role, taking care of him, cooking, washing, among other things. In the year of 1943, her husband decided to enlist to the Marine, so he has to go to the Second World War. So Norma's left alone in the house, and that's when she decided to start working to support herself. Back then, working in ammunition factories was very ordinary, so she decided to present herself to one and work there. In the year of 1944 was when her life completely changed, because a journalist for a very important newspaper back then was writing an article about women's contribution to the Second World War. So he decided to take some photographs of Marilyn while she worked. And that's when they discovered her talent as a model. From then on, many advertising companies started contacting her for advertising campaigns, and she became, by 1945, a very renowned model, making the cover of at least 33 magazines. By 1946, she decides to end her contract with the factory and to dedicate full-time to being a model. However, she also starts having a very pronounced interest for acting. On the 23rd of July of that same year, she decides to sign a contract with 20th Century Fox as a supporting actress for various productions, for a wage of $125 per week. When she first entered the studio, they decide to change her name from Norma Jean to Marilyn Monroe. She chooses to use that nickname or stage name, taking her grandmother's last name, which was MONROE, and the name of one of her favorite actresses from back then, called Marilyn Miller. In 1947, she makes her debut in the movie The Shocking Miss Pilgrim. In 1953, she obtained her first lead role as Rose in the movie Niagara, with which she had some really good reviews. That's when her career started to take off. It is from that movie that comes the photograph that Andy Warhol used on his pieces. Sometime after, while she was working at 20th Century Fox, she realized that her wages weren't rising, and she was really upset because her co-workers got paid more and they had even less roles than her. So she decided to quit because they didn't want to raise her salary. Obviously, after that, 20th Century Fox called for a press conference and made a scandal so they could trash her public image. However, she said, "I'm not going to allow this," so she started gathering many media to set things straight and avoid her image being damaged. On January 14, she married one of the most important Yankees baseball players back then. His name was Joe DiMaggio. In 1955, she was part of one of the most successful films for her, called The 7-Year Itch. Because of it, she received many awards and countless positive reviews. However, due to this movie, she had to divorce Joe DiMaggio because he didn't like the role she was adopting in the films, all sensual and showing a lot of skin. Also, the iconic photograph of her with the skirt blowing in the air is from this movie, and that upset Joey really badly. After this, she decides to start taking acting classes, and she even inaugurates her own studio because she's at the peak of her fame. In 1956, in the month of June, she marries for the third time, this time with Arthur Miller. Because he was Jewish, she decided to convert to this religion so they could marry. However, by the year of 1959, her decline has begun due to various health issues. Since the movie Some Like It Hot, she started to have many problems. She was late, she didn't learn her lines, she had to redo many scenes constantly, among other things. That caused for her co-workers and producers to be upset. Also, during that time, she lost her first child due to a spontaneous abortion. Because of the loss of her son, the stress of the fame, and many other things, both her mental and physical health declined a lot. She started going to the psychologist and the psychiatrist. Her doctor was called Ralph Greenson and was the one who was with her during the whole process. She also started to suffer from insomnia, depressive and nervous episodes, leading her to consume many pharmaceutical drugs and alcohol. In 1961, she divorced Arthur Miller due to all these problems, and after that, her health worsened. Then she filmed in 1962 Something's Gotta Give and began having problems like sinusitis, bronchitis, pneumonia, which really affected her scheduled filming days, precisely back then when the movie was being filmed. It was a very important movie for 20th Century Fox because they were going bankrupt after producing Cleopatra, which costed a lot of money. They had all hope set on this new film. However, it seemed that Marilyn didn't take it seriously and was also very ill. Additional to that, during that time, on May 20th, the birthday celebration for the president took place in New York. Back then, it was John F. Kennedy. She went to that gala, which surely many of you have seen, in which she sang the happy birthday song to the president.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Mr. President. Happy birthday to you.
That was her last public event she attended before dying, and here is where this case begins, where the facts of her passing away appear. It is said that the day she died, namely August 5th, 1962, she spoke in the morning with her ex-husband Joey DiMaggio. It seemed that she had sex with him sporadically and that they still maintained some sort of romantic relationship. However, Joe told her that they should stop, that he didn't feel it was right anymore. According to what Joe said, MARILYN took that very well and he was like, fine, it doesn't matter. Later in the afternoon, Mr. Pete Lawford, who was John F. Kennedy's sister's husband, invited her to a party he was having at his house. Nevertheless, she refused because she wasn't in the mood. However, Pete was feeling a little worried, and at night, he called and told the housekeeper to please check on MARILYN, for he felt something wasn't right. At 3 in the morning, Mrs. MONROE, who was MARILYN's housekeeper, decides to go check, finding her dead on the bed. The phone in her hand, the room's lighting on, and a big jar of Nembutal, which seemed to be the medicine she took for her insomnia. That indicated that it was an overdose. But you probably already know about this case, the way in which MARILYN died. It is said that it was practically a suicide. She was tired of everything, was very depressed, and committed suicide. I'm going to tell you what appears to be the truth. I feel like this is not just another conspiracy theory, but what really happened, which is that MARILYN didn't commit suicide, but she was murdered. Let's start with some very clear theories first so you can understand why people know or feel that she didn't really kill herself. First of all, when the police officers and all arrived, they realized that the room was extremely organized. MARILYN, for the people who knew her, was a really untidy person. She constantly had her room all deorganized, her things all over the place, like she didn't care much about that aspect. So the fact that the room was organized really drew the attention itself. On the other hand, the positioning when they found her was a little odd. She was completely naked, face down, and with the hands facing down too. However, the rigor mortis, which is what the forensic technicians find when someone has died, and determine the position in which they died, seemed to say that she hadn't died face down but lying on her back. Also, her clothes, the ones she had worn that day, were in the washing machine and her sheets were completely clean. Everything seemed to indicate that Eunice Murray, who was the housekeeper, had cleaned the room to perfection before the police arrived. Likewise, it appears that she had died 8 hours before Murray notified the police. On the other hand, she also had some blows and bruises in her body. Also, the photographs she had inside a little box on her bedside table and all of her phone records had been erased and were completely gone. Well, then let us start talking about what could have happened. Ralph Brinson, who's precisely the psychologist and psychiatrist that I told you, was with her from the moment she started having depressive episodes, among other things, said in a press conference that MARILYN had started to surround herself with people who were not good for her and that could harm her. This gave way to a suspicious ambience to think, well, who could be the people who want to hurt her? As I've told you, Peter Lawford was John F. Kennedy's sister's husband, namely Patricia Kennedy. 3 months before her death, MARILYN had been invited to a dinner party that Patricia and Peter had organized. In that dinner, she met Patricia's brothers, John F. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy. From that moment on, it was said that both Robert and John started having an extra-matrimonial affair with MARILYN. According to what is said, the next day after the dinner, John called MARILYN again to invite her to a trip he was going to take. A trip to which his wife wasn't going. However, in the afternoon, he called her and told her that they better not do it. It seemed that obviously, he realized what kind of a mistake he will make if somebody found out that he was involved with MARILYN in the middle of his presidential campaign. It is said that discreetly, he asked her not to come with him, but assured her that she could go with her brother, Robert. It was like they were throwing her back and forth. This appeared to upset MARILYN a great deal, for they were using her like a piece of trash, like a piece of paper they could throw to each other, and she began to threaten the Kennedy brothers. It seems like in this birthday celebration for John F. Kennedy, everything started to become very evident. MARILYN began acting in a very seductive way around him, like letting people know there was probably something going on between them. As you saw in the video, she looked very pretty in that gala. She was wearing a very tight gray dress. They had to sew it from behind when she was already wearing it because she really wanted to be skin tight so her figure looked beautiful. Also, the dress was like a gray kind of whitish color, which gave the illusion that Marilyn was naked. It is said that for this birthday celebration, John Kennedy's wife found out that Marilyn was going, so she said, "I'm not going with you." Apparently, she felt something was weird between them. After all this, as I've told you, Marilyn began to be very upset because she felt very used by the Kennedys. Many of their friends say that she asserted that she had very confidential and dangerous information from the Kennedys and that she was going to use it against them if they kept manipulating her. Here's the origin point of this conspiracy, which I'm obviously sure it's super real. It is that basically Robert Kennedy ordered the murder of Marilyn Monroe. It seems like Marilyn Monroe threatened to call for a press conference to tell all of the Kennedy's secrets. As you know, or I don't know if you know, the Kennedy had many links with the mob. There was plenty of evidence that indicated that they were involved in things they shouldn't be. So Marilyn had all that information and was going to reveal it. With this fear that both Robert and John had, they decided to have her killed with Peter Slaughter's help, namely with the help of their sister's husband. It is said that they asked her psychiatrist to administer her a lethal injection to kill her. There's a difference between psychologists and psychiatrists, which is that the psychiatrists are the only ones that can prescribe medicines for the person who's suffering from this or that, so they can buy the medicine to appease their affection. They said it was very normal for him to administer Marilyn the medications she needed to sleep, among other things. That's why, through him, Robert decided to kill Marilyn. There are even rumors that say that the special services that tended to Marilyn's after her death found she had a broken rib. Like there had been a sort of a fight or something between Ralph and her, like she didn't want the injection, or maybe he did something wrong. It is unknown. There's a very significant piece of evidence in this case, which is that they didn't find any kind of drug in Marilyn's stomach when she died. Supposedly, the theory was that she died because of an overdose. Thomas Noguchi, who was one of the doctors and also investigators from the case, said that her stomach and her bloodstream were completely free of drugs. There wasn't anything that indicated an overdose as the cause of death. This is overall the theory that states that, obviously, everything was a plan from the Kennedys to murder her. There's a debate around if they killed her through Ralph or if they did it using an enema. What I'm telling you is that they also didn't find any drug or anything in her bloodstream, so that probably rules out the injection. So the people thought about an enema. For those of you who don't know, an enema is used to clean all the inside of the intestines. A liquid gets introduced there, all that's inside the intestines gets absorbed, and afterwards everything is expelled through the excrement. It is said that probably that was the method they used to cause an overdose in Marilyn. For they probably knocked her out with some medicine and then applied the enema while she was asleep. They caused an overdose and then she died. Given that, they had to make sure she expelled everything through her excrement, among other things, and maybe that's why they washed all the sheets, changed her position, etc. Other thing that also support this theory is that one of Marilyn's neighbors say that some 5 hours before they seen an ambulance parked very close to Marilyn's house. They say that in all night the ambulance didn't move until what happened to Marilyn, which is when it went to her house. They say that a huge group of personnel from a cleaning department went to the house, seemed to clean everything up, and the neighbors couldn't know anything more about her until after the police and the people in charge went to remove the body. They were basically some persons who became key witnesses and were very important to determine that this is what probably happened. The first key witness for this fact was Eunice Murray. As I've told you, Eunice was Marilyn's housekeeper and the key piece in all of this. It started to be said that what they told wasn't the truth, for she said she found Marilyn dead. She described how the situation occurred at first, but nobody believed her because it didn't make much sense. She said she left the bathroom and then went to Marilyn's bedroom. She said that she saw from under the door the light was on. However, this appeared weird because Marilyn had a really thick carpet that sometimes even prevented the door from being opened. That said, it was impossible for her to see a light from under the door. She had said she'd seen a light, she found it odd, she became worried and entered the room. But why, if she knew that Marilyn suffered from insomnia, Why was it odd to her that she might be awake at that time? After that, she changed radically what she said and stated that her Piscean intuition, because she was a Pisces, indicated that something was really wrong. It's like, what are you saying? However, everything changed a lot by 1985. Some filmmakers called Tim Landert and Anthony Summers were producing a documentary about Marilyn. For this, they interview a lot of people that surrounded Marilyn's death, and they obviously interview Inez. She told them her version as she had always told it, and then when the cameras were off, she said, "At my age and I have to keep covering this up?" They say that then Mrs. Eunice sat down and started telling them what really happened. She said that Robert Kennedy had been that night at Marilyn's house and that Ralph Greenson had arrived when she was still alive, that he even was the one who called for an ambulance. She said that Marilyn had had a very strong argument with Robert, and that everything got so out of hand that Robert's bodyguards had to intervene so they wouldn't hurt each other. This is regarding the first witness. The second witness is called Norman Jeffries. Norman Jeffries is very important because he's precisely Eunice Murray's son-in-law. He said that the day before he had been also working at Marilyn's house. His job was different from his mother-in-law's, for he was repairing Marilyn's kitchen floor. He saw that she woke up that morning and her appearance was worrying. She looked very badly. He said he didn't know if he saw her very ill or very scared, that her attitude was very odd, or she must have taken something that had altered her. Or maybe she was fearful of something that could happen. Between 3 and 4 in the afternoon, he saw Robert Kennedy arrive with Peter Lawford, who ordered him to go to the supermarket along with Mrs. Murray to buy some Coca-Cola. He said they went back like an hour later, and in that moment they saw the man with Marilyn, and Marilyn was going through a nervous attack. She was hysterical and furious. Meanwhile, Marilyn's secretary was trying to calm her down. He said that right then, Eunice called Ralph, Marilyn's therapist, asking him to please come to the house. He said that after the psychiatrist arrived, they stayed watching TV. After that, he said that around 9, Robert Kennedy came back with 2 other men, and he supposed they were men who worked for the government. They told him that he had to leave the house, and he was obviously very afraid because it wasn't like, please leave kindly, but like, you have to go now, you can't be here right now. However, he said that they stayed somewhat close to the house because he had no idea what was going on. The next witness is Fred Odash, who was a private detective that was hired around the time. He was interviewed in 1985 by a journalist who wanted to document what had happened that night. He said that he had installed some months before Marilyn's death an array of secret microphones in her house and in Peter's Lawford. He said he listened to many of Marilyn's conversations with other people, and that they even were recordings of Marilyn and Robert making love. He also said that there was one in particular about a nasty fight that Marilyn had with Robert on the day she died. Is that the same fight that both Eunice and Jeffrey heard? I don't know. He said she was screaming, "They have thrown me from one to the other. I feel like a piece of meat." And Robert replied to her, "Where is it? Give it to me. I have to take it back. My family is going to pay you if that's what you want." Some noises could also be heard, like he was trashing the room, looking everywhere for something that Marilyn probably had. He said that on that night, Peter Lawford came to where he was and told her that Marilyn was dead, and that he should make every piece of evidence that could implicate him and Robert Kennedy disappear. Likewise, after telling him all this, he asked him to please call Robert and tell him that he had fulfilled his part and that he should see him later. The next witness is called Pat Newcomb. She was Marilyn's publicist and secretary. It is said that she was on that Friday night at Marilyn's house and that both of them had a really intense argument. This supposedly because Pat was also involved with Robert Kennedy. It is said that this upset Marilyn a great deal, and they obviously argued for the love of this man. One FBI report even said that Marilyn's death was a complot between Pat and Eunice, Marilyn's housekeeper, to stress her beyond reason and force her to end her life. That said, the following year after Marilyn's death, everything that was said about Pat proved to be truth because she later got a job as an agent who'd link Hollywood and the state. The next witness is Ralph Greenson, who is very important because he was Marilyn's psychiatrist. He said that on August 4th, he had received a very worrying call from Marilyn. He perceived her very depressed, very sad, and he obviously went immediately to help her. He said that 2.5 hours later, she was calmer after an argument she had with her secretary, but she still felt a lot of anger towards her. After speaking with Marilyn and having gone home after Madeline told her to please go, that she didn't want him there anymore, he told Mrs. Murray to please keep an eye on Marilyn that night. Around 8, he said that she received a call from Marilyn telling him she had just spoken with Joe DiMaggio and that she was glad she did it. According to him, that left him at ease and she was fine during that day. Until later at 3 in the morning, he received a call from a very desperate Mrs. Murray telling him that Marilyn was dead. This was Ralph's version to defend himself, saying that he didn't have anything to do with it. But I find it a little odd that she was able to calm herself during that time and then suddenly he got a call from the housekeeper saying that she was dead. The last testimony, which I think is the most crucial one of all and the most important to assert that it was really the Kennedys who were behind the murder of Marilyn, is one given by a CIA retired officer. This man called Norman Hodge, when he was 78 years old, gave a very important statement for some newspapers. He said that between the years of 1959 and 1972, he had been recruited by the CIA to be a contract killer. He said that he had killed around 37 people that were a potential threat to the government, and then Marilyn was one of them. He remembered down to every detail all of the murders he committed, which constantly included victims like to politics, journalism, syndical leaders, scientists, and even artists. He said that the actress had many pieces of evidence to prove she had had sexual encounters with the Kennedys. They told him that Marilyn had to die, for she was very dangerous to the state and that he had to obey his orders. He said that she was the first woman he killed and that he was really upset about that, but it was his job and he had to do it. He said that on that night, Marilyn was asleep when he entered her room and mixed a lethal dose with a combination of chloral hydrate and Nimbutal. He said that given Marilyn's addiction to her medicines at that time, it wouldn't be odd at all if the investigator took it as a suicide. Regarding a second theory, Marilyn, some weeks or months before, was in Mexico City, and it is said that she had a secret interview with a man called Frederick Vanderbilt. It is said that this man told her some very confidential information and that she also told him that she was really worried about John F. Kennedy's conditions. It seemed that he was a man who was addicted to women who played with them, among other things. It was like there was an exchange of information between them. Apparently, the FBI and all of the secret society of the USA were very upset about her exchanging information with the communists, for that didn't work well on the government. Besides, the man wasn't the only one of her communist friends. There were other people like Jose Bolaños, a Mexican screenwriter who was also a communist. Additional to that, it is said that he was the last person she spoke to before she died. Because all of this, the FBI desired to hire or call her psychiatrist Ralph Greenson, so he will kill Marilyn with an overdose. One last conspiracy theory says that what many theories says when an artist dies, and it is basically that Marilyn was very done with the fame, so she decided to disappear. Namely, she is still alive. It seems that people say that, as I've told you, Marilyn had many emotional problems. She was living with depression, very ill, divorced again for the 3rd time, lost a son, among many other things. All this started affecting her, so she said like, I'm tired of fame, I'm absolutely tired about all of this, I want to leave, disappear, change my identity. According to this, it is said that the photographs that were shown of Marilyn's body in her house and also the people who were present that day, well, they say that the body was very odd, that it seemed fake, like she wasn't a real person. So this gave way to the hypothesis that supported that she was alive. It's even said that many years later, around the 90s, a woman was walking on the beach and saw another woman very alike to Marilyn. So she decided to approach her and told her like, Marilyn, Marilyn, I know it's you. After that, a man in black suit arrived, talked with the first woman for a moment, and then when she turned around, Marilyn wasn't there any longer. That does sound a little stranger, I don't know yet if that was true, I just read it. But anyway, those were basically the theories of all the key witnesses of this case. I think all of those witnesses I mentioned are reliable proof that the Kennedys had a lot to do with this, or even that they were the masterminds behind this planned suicide. I don't find it strange that she would commit suicide. It makes a lot of sense, but what doesn't make sense is that they really didn't find any trace of drug in her system. Also, she had the phone in her hand, and that after they didn't find the record, or that the phone records of those calls had mysteriously disappeared. I think there are many things that don't really fall into place in Marilyn's supposed suicide. They say for me it makes way more sense if it was a murder, especially given by the Kennedys. But anyways, we'll leave here the case of Marilyn Monroe. It really is one of my favorites for all the details and the information surrounding it. Also, I think it's not a secret that many artists get silenced because maybe they know a lot of things. I don't know if you want me to do a very interesting video, which can also be very related to this one, about the 27 Club. I don't want to spoil much about it, but it's about the untimely deaths of some artists and the theories that surround those cases, so if you want me to film it, let me know in the comments. But for now, as always, don't forget to leave some thumbs up if you like the video. Don't forget to comment and leave suggestions about other ideas you want me to do, and if you like me to film about the 27 Club. Don't forget to follow me on all my social media. You know I have like a billion social media accounts, and the most important thing is to subscribe to this wonderful channel. Also, activate the notification bell, which lets you know when I upload a new video. And that's it. That's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching me. Don't forget to follow your dreams, and let's see you in the next one. Bye!